Greetings, this is Junior Martin of Bob Marley and the Wailers. The time has come for the lion to tell his story. And we have here the lion voice. So listen in and get nourishment for the stomach and for the head cup. Jah Rastafari.
Give thanks.
Give thanks and praise.
Yo, this is Pagabens and time have come for the lion to tell them one story. This is the Lion's Voice. Stay tuned.
Well, Lion Voice, tell them that's the people first choice. Lion Voice, make the lioness them feel nice. Lion Voice, with the lion cubs we sacrifice. Lion Voice, got to show the people them the life. Lion Voice. Well, Haile Selassie the first, the Almighty, and he was crowned with Empress Menen. And you see there come a time in every relationship and it brand new and your heart is full of doubt. And you try investigate to check things out. And sometimes you see if you follow word of mouth, you end up take the wrong route. Well, it's a mystery, what a mystery, and I can't see. But will she diss me? Will she trick me? Or is it just me? But it's a mystery, what a mystery, and I can't see. But will she diss me? Or will she be the wife and mother of my baby? Sometimes I feel like she's holding back. Something inside says it don't react. Sometimes I hear how the people chat. Most of the time we ignore all of that. The way she read books made my soul relax. Love how she look and she proud to be black. Me love how she cook and how she state the fact. She said the wicked are female like wax. Well, it's a mystery, what a mystery, and I can't see. Well, will she diss me? Will she trick me? Or is it just me? Well, it's a mystery. Well, front to us a son was born and a child was given.
I want to ask you a question. Have you gotten your book? Haile Selassie's Ethiopia Volume 1, The Rise of the Priest Warrior King. I've read the book in its entirety and I must say it's very inspirational, very informative, and very historical, right?
Them call him Lij when he was born, rain fall from sky. Them call him Lij when he was grown in airplanes he fly. They call him Lij the lion break the chain, weep not, don't cry. Them call him Lij read the Revelation chapter 5 verse 5. Then born near the city of Harar, the inspiration for Bob Marley's guitar. People crowd him like some big superstar. It no matter if Greetings in that divine name of His Imperial Majesty, Emperor Haile Selassie I. Glory and honor in the name of His chosen Queen, Empress Waziri Menen. My name is Kwasi Bansu, aka the Chasmach Kwasi, aka Ras Kwasi, aka the Reading Ras, aka the Pan-African Happy Man. I'm a creative industry attorney, I'm an artist, I'm an author, I'm an actionist, and right now I am the host of the Lion Talk Live. Welcome to the Lion Voice Network and welcome to Lion Talk Live, where we talk to frontline workers in the vineyard of Rastafari and the Pan-African struggle. We have a very special episode tonight. I'm very excited about this one. All of the history buffs, you know that this is the location you have to be. We are getting ready to celebrate the anniversary of the Battle of Adwa. We're going to get deep into Ethiopian history and culture, Solomonic Dynasty. It's going to be a nice one, family. This one is going to be one of them episodes that people will watch for generations to come. Trust me. I'm excited about it. Big up Lion Pride and big up the Lion Pride on Patreon. We have 11 Fire Angels who are supporting the channel with their economic contribution. So I want to honor and say big up, special big up to Freeway Dread, giving a suggestion in the Patreon and reasoning Agwan in the Patreon. So that's where the inner circle of this channel, we're really building a community. Join us and help to support independent Rastafari media. We're going to build this into something major, because why? The Lions have to tell our own story. We cannot, in this modern era, try to compete with Babylon and we're not controlling our narrative. So I want to big up the Lion Pride on Patreon for supporting us. Also, big up Ramia King Design, Ross Lij. You got the tumblers. Make sure you send the brethren your strength. This is for us, by us. Big up CMOS Life. All of the sponsors, everyone who sees the work and is helping us to make this a sustainable reality. I just wanted to say give thanks before we get into this epic episode. We are getting ready, family, to go into March, which is Women History Month. We are going to be flooding the YouTube airwaves with Rastafari women content. I have been working. We're scheduling the interviews. We're going to be bringing some dynamic sistering to the platform. So if you're not subscribed, make sure you subscribe to the platform. Hit the notification bell so that you can stay in touch. We are highlighting the Rastafari woman for the month of March. Empress Menen's Earthstrong is April. So we want to make sure, leading up to the Empress's Earthstrong, we big up the queens. Right now on the channel, we have the Blue Fire Eye Treat episode. Go check it out. Rastafari sisters have come together to have an oasis of building and development and mystery school and all these things in a one. So check that out on the channel. It's live right now. We have our Bob Marley One Love movie review live right now on the channel. We have the Danny Dread, the legendary Danny Dread interview on the channel. We have Stanley Davis. A lot of content. So welcome. If this is your first time on the Lion Voice Network, we are building a dynamic catalog of Rastafari Pan-African content on this channel. So I just want to say, give thanks. All right. Housekeeping is out of the way. Let me set the stage for what's about to happen tonight, family. This is one is going to be nice. All right. First of all, I've known this brethren for many, many years. You know, over a decade, I know this brethren. So let me just get that out of the way. This is a brethren who love His Majesty, just like I, you know, anytime we get together, we're going back and forth. But because he actually is descending from the bloodline, the Solomonic bloodline, and we're going to talk about this Solomonic dynasty, the bloodline. We're going to get into all of the facts because he has family experience that he can draw from. You know, the history that I read about in books is actually family history, is actually part of his lived experience in terms of what he brings to the table. He's a businessman here in America, but he's also the founder and the executive of Selassie Stand Up, who fought. Many ones will see that there is now a statue of Her Majesty in front of the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa. This was the brethren who really led that charge and spearheaded that campaign to have that statue there. He's been a long-time advisor to the Crown Council, currently serving as the PR representative for the Crown Council of Ethiopia, traveling around the world in this auspicious role, and one of the most knowledgeable people that I know just in general about His Majesty, the reign of His Majesty, Ethiopian history, culture, the Solomonic dynasty, these things. So we're going to get deep, family, tonight, because you know this is the reading Ras. I want you to get your pen and your paper, get ready to take some notes. But first, my family, 7 of us, 7 divine souls, in the chat right now. Help I to welcome warm Lion Pride welcome for Lij Nebyat Demessie. Bless him, my brother.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the warm and very energetic introduction. So
yes,
I'm a little bit under the weather, but I wouldn't have missed this for anything. So pleasure to be here.
We give thanks. First, let's just start. Where were you born, and just give us your journey, to where you are today.
Sure. I was born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio. So I'm a Midwesterner. I went to school at the University of Michigan, so spent about 6 years in Ann Arbor, where I did my undergrad and grad degree. So as you mentioned earlier, I'm in the business aspect of healthcare, so I work in the health insurance industry. So that's taken me to many places, particularly Philadelphia, New York City, Washington, D.C. area as well. So I'm currently in Ohio right now as we speak, but travel very frequently. And as you mentioned, I launched a grassroots movement called Selassie Stand Up. And I also serve as the head of PR for the Crown Council, serving in an advisory capacity to His Imperial Highness Prince Ermias Haile Selassie, who serves as the president of the Crown Council of Ethiopia.
Give thanks. And why the interest? What explain to us where your mother and father from? Why the interest in serving Ethiopia, being born in America as you were?
Sure. So my parents were born and raised in Ethiopia. I also spent some time in Ethiopia as well. My parents came actually in the early 70s through the American Field Service Program. I have a line to the Solomonic lineage through my mother to King Haile Selassie, which traces his lineage all the way back to King Solomon and Queen of Sheba. Where
in Ethiopia is your mother from? Which province?
So she's from. So technically, my parents are both from the northern Showa area. They were born. My dad was born in Addis Ababa. My mother actually was born in an area called Gojam in Debre Marcos, actually in Gojam, because my grandfather was in the military under the emperor, serving during that time. But
Gojam, you said?
She was born there, correct?
Okay.
But her ancestry.
That's an area that had a lot of rebellion. We're gonna get there,
That's true. She was born there, but that's because my grandfather was stationed there. Otherwise, they're from the northern area called Menz, Bulga, and also the Ankober area where my great grandfather and great grandmother lived before they came.
That's also where Menelik II grew up as well, Ankober.
That's correct. Right.
Yes. Before he was taken captive. We're gonna get deep, family. So two parents from Showa. During the time of the emperor, what was your father doing? Your grandfather? Give us some of the connection, so that people, when we get into the Battle of Adwa, why you're so passionate, because this is part of your family legacy.
Right. Sure, yeah. So my grandfather served as a major in the military under Emperor Haile Selassie. He was actually stationed in Asmara, Eritrea, for many, many years. His father actually was he was in charge of Emperor Menelik's military depot in a place called Koramash in Bulga, in the northern Showa area.
Yes.
And so they had very close ties. He was there. My grandfather grew up in Bulga, I think up to the age of 15. He then later moved to Addis Ababa as his father was summoned by Emperor Menelik, and was on, he traveled throughout the southern portion of the country, trying to garner the support and endorsement of various Oromo and Gurage landlords as well, to kind of solidify the unity of the country. But subsequent to that, my grandfather was in the military, so he fought in the second war against Italians. And my great grandfather.
What are you? By the second war, are you talking about Adwa or?
No, the war in 1935.
Oh, 1935. And what's your grandfather's name? Let's call the ancestors.
Sure. My grandfather is Major Lamma Lasadik. This is his name.
Okay. So people, these are important historical figures. So my Ethiopian history buffs, we're gonna get deep tonight. All right. So grandfather fought. Did you have any relatives that actually fought in the Battle of Adwa?
Yes, I mean we had so on my great grandfather's side, there were relatives, who fought in that war. But in terms of actually leading the military command at that time, through relation we have, but in terms of a direct lineage, I don't have no.
Okay. You mentioned the efforts that Menelik had to expand the kingdom to the south, because this becomes a very big point of contention. Even today in present Ethiopia, you use very diplomatic terms in terms of reaching out to the landlords. A lot of people, particularly in places like RC, have a gripe that Menelik was an imperialist, and it was by violence that the kingdom was established. What do you say to this kind of reasoning?
Well, in terms of how certain parts were incorporated within the broader union. Well, there are various perspectives regarding that. I think, in terms of solidifying the unity of the country, was necessary during that time, in particular because of the threat of colonialism that was encroaching upon Ethiopia, and was a lot of African countries were under colonial rule during that time. And so it was necessary to solidify the unity of all Ethiopians under one strong central command. And that's what Emperor Menelik was able to accomplish during his time.
And Emperor Menelik, again, is coming off of the lineage of King Haile Selassie. Can you just explain to the people who was King Haile Selassie, for those who are not familiar?
Sure. So King Haile Selassie was a king of Shoa. Shoa is a province within Ethiopia. And King Haile Selassie is the grandfather of Emperor Menelik, and he was also the great-grandfather of Emperor Haile Selassie, also the grandfather of Ras Makonnen, who was the first cousin of Emperor Menelik as well.
Okay, and what, give us some highlights about, why he was an important figure during his time.
Yeah, so King Haile Selassie was around during the era of princes, but Shoa was instrumental in terms of really the if you look at the descendants of King Haile Selassie in terms of solidifying the unity of Ethiopia, right? Through his descendancy, I would say is where the prominence really comes from Shoa. So Emperor Menelik, Emperor Haile Selassie, Ras Makonnen himself, who was a descendant. There are other descendants as well who were able to protect Ethiopia's borders. Nugus Wande Gurgis is one, for example, along the Sudan-Ethiopian border. He was very instrumental. He was later king of Gondar as well, despite his Shoan ancestry. And they played a pivotal role in galvanizing all Ethiopians under one national identity, and protecting the interests and the territorial sovereignty of Ethiopia. So I would say Shoa is one house of the Solomonic dynasty. There are four. You have the house of the Solomonic dynasty from Tigray, the Gondar Lasta, Shoa, and Gojam as well. And I would say the past 100, 150 years or so, I would say was dominated by the Shoan kings as well. Maybe starting from King Haile Selassie through the rule of Emperor Haile Selassie as well. And of course, the daughter of Emperor Menelik, Emperor Zodi II, and Lij Nebyat, the grandson of Emperor Menelik, although they had connections maybe to other royal houses as well, like the House of Wollo, Lij Nebyat through his father, who was King Mikhail of Wollo. Despite that dual ancestry, they all had ties to the Shoan royal house through King Haile Selassie.
Okay. You mentioned the era of princes. These are things I wrote about in my book, Haile Selassie's Ethiopia. And this is, these are the things that made Ayman fall in love with Ethiopian history, because it sounds so fantastical. It sounds like something from Lord of the Rings. It sounds like something from Game of Thrones. It sounds like something from, you got Dune coming out in the theaters, the era of princes. Explain to people what was the era of princes in Ethiopia, and then the context, because King Haile Selassie, he actually established Showa as a kingdom during this time, before they were just races or feudal lords, but he became so strong internally that he was able to declare, and this was a time of puppet emperors, where the emperors really didn't hold the power. The power was held by the provinces, the races, the warlords. You know what I mean? Talk to us about, from your overstanding as an Ethiopian, what did you learn, or what is your overstanding about the era of princes, and what time period was, the era of princes, just for those who may not be aware.
Right. So the era of princes was a time where there were various provincial kings, and to your point, they had what they called Ambawani, where these very powerful races and warlords would sometimes even appoint who would be king, of course, of the anointed, Solomonic line. And so there was a point where Showa was governed, was self-governed, or was an independent state within Ethiopia. So to your point, King Haile Selassie had declared Showa as a separate, independent kingdom, and it was Emperor Theodros who came up from Gondar, who actually then reunified,
yes,
and reestablished a strong central command governing all of Ethiopia under one emperor.
Definitely. How strong? A lot of I've heard a lot of critics dismiss the Solomonic lineage of Ethiopia as a myth, as mythology. How strong, in terms of Ethiopians, is the importance of that Solomonic bloodline or that dynasty? And you grew up in the West, so you're Western educated, the finest schools, but you also have this link through your mother directly to King Haile Selassie. How important is the Solomonic dynasty to Ethiopians?
Oh no, it's very important. I mean, it serves as a premise of the monarchy itself, and in fact, there's a book called the Kibra Negast, the Glory of Kings, which documents and explains the entire lineage from the time of King Solomon and Queen Sheba, how they bore a child named Menelik, who was the first king of Ethiopia, essentially from the Solomonic line. And Emperor Haile Selassie himself is the 225th direct descendant of that Solomonic lineage. And so, it's what qualifies someone to be an emperor. Obviously, there was the Zagwe dynasty, which came into rule in Ethiopia, I believe around the 9th century, if I'm not mistaken. Or actually after that. But so the Zagwe dynasty also, although they don't have a direct line to Solomon, they do talk about having a lineage to King Solomon's brother, and being descendants of that as well. So you can see that the linkage and connection to the Solomonic line is very strong, and it really serves as a premise which qualifies someone to be. So you can only become an emperor or empress if you really come from that lineage as it pertains to the Solomonic dynasty. And so all of the kings and queens were anointed as such. So that, people have different perspectives on it. I mean, there's sufficient scientific evidence which suggests that there was an influx of people from the Levant area around the time that the Kibra Negast was written, documenting the history of King Solomon and Queen of Sheba. So there's both scientific evidence and then a book which documents the whole history behind the dynasty.
Let me stir the boat a little bit. Do Ethiopians view King Solomon as a white man? Because, in the West, all of these biblical figures are depicted with blonde hair, blue eyes. There's somebody who's going to watch this and say, how can this man say he has Solomonic bloodline and he looks black? He looks like he's from Chicago or Detroit. You know what I mean? Who does he think he is talking about these biblical figures? You know what I mean? what do you say, or what is the Ethiopian conception of what Solomon looked like in terms of his race and how that connects with the Queen of Sheba?
Right. I mean, that's a good question. I mean, I think the matter of race is really not that extent in Ethiopia's psyche and minds, to be honest with you. I mean, I don't think someone from the Middle East would be classified as being white to begin with. And people, you know, I'm sure perhaps he was fair skinned, but I don't think the notion that he was white or black is often really discussed amongst Ethiopians. I think he's known to be, king of Israel. And Ethiopians from the Solomonic line claim descent from him. And in fact, Emperor Theodorus was trying to, during the era of coming out of the Arab princes, was claiming to expand his empire to be inclusive of Israel as well, based on that lineage. And so I think I would answer it from that perspective.
Yes. Because one of the concerns that we have as Rastafari is that when we look at the ancient scrolls in Ethiopia, we see, these figures depicted more like Ethiopians. And then when we go now, we notice Yeshua, all of these people becoming very European, in their phenotype. Even the pictures of Jesus Christos that are being put out by the Orthodox Church, you're seeing a lot of these white images now. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to tell you the truth that we as Rastafari are concerned, especially when you look at the scrolls from the Ge'ez and things, you notice, a very clear intention to depict these figures, not, much different than Ethiopians.
Right.
So what do you think is the cause of the lightening of the biblical figures? Is this, the Protestant movement coming in with European texts and things, or is this coming from inside of the Orthodox Church? What do you think is causing this?
No, very good question. I'm glad you brought that up because I actually asked this question when I was being given a tour of Holy Trinity Cathedral in Addis Ababa. Because if you observe some of the older churches in Ethiopia, particularly in the northern regions like in Gondar, in Gojam, and Tigray, you'll see biblical figures and iconography representative of representing saints and biblical figures in the image of how ancient Ethiopians may have looked, right? And I think we've lost that artistic craft, and because they started importing from overseas, from Europe, I think the iconography that you see now is more reflective of European art rather than African, and so you see that change. And then you have the scriptures itself, right, which to a certain extent give some type of description of how Jesus Christ may have looked in terms of hair, like sheep's wool, color the, skin the color of brass and whatnot. So some of the images you see don't necessarily show him doesn't really show him reflecting that type of image. But I would say that's the main reason why we see that now.
Yeah, and I think that's something that as a Crown Council in particular, that's something an area of potential partnership, in terms of just imagery, iconography that can be produced that reflects that ancient Ethiopian, keeping that art style alive and keeping those things alive, so that we're producing our own images of these figures. I think that's something, because culture, we know the power of culture, the power of images, the power of the story is very crucial. So in terms of your journey, you said that you did live in Ethiopia for a time?
Yes, I did. Throughout my youth, and then there was a time where I spent about a year in Ethiopia as well. So I speak Amharic fluently. I'm very well versed in the culture, language, and history as well. So yes.
What struck you growing up, in terms of the diaspora experience, did you always have knowledge that you were a part of this Solomonic dynasty, or was it kind of like an awakening moment to say, "Oh, this connects with my story"? When you're reading the Bible, what was that like growing up out of the Ethiopian, space,
Mhm.
but learning the culture outside? What was that like for you?
Yeah, so I mean, I always felt like I had, there was something special about being Ethiopian. I mean, when you look at the history, when you look at not only the lineage but the history as well, the only country in Africa to be independent. We had a very strong sense of identity and culture, and so that really helped to, I would say, to build my character and my identity as it pertains to me being an Ethiopian. My great grandmother would talk about this lineage to Haile Selassie more so than I would say even my grandparents, and then my parents. They knew relatives here and there, but it wasn't really the royal lineage. Perhaps maybe because of the deposition of the monarchy, or them. Both my parents grew up during the time of Emperor Haile Selassie, but growing up in America, after the deposition, obviously we were very proud to be Ethiopian, proud of the monarchs that throughout Ethiopian history, and the patriots also that fought alongside them as well. These were stories that I always heard about growing up, and I was very close to my grandfather who fought in the war against Italy in 1935 to 41. He also accompanied the emperor in Sudan after the emperor was in exile for 5 years upon his Majesty's return. He accompanied the emperor in Omidlat, the base the base in Sudan, where the Ethiopian flag was raised, and accompanied the emperor all the way to Addis Ababa, and in fact took command upon a special request actually from Emperor Haile Selassie so there were the Ethiopian army at the time had some type of intelligence regarding Italy trying to re-enter Ethiopia, crossing this bridge in Dabaj and Gojam, and he asked 4 people if they were willing to sacrifice their lives for the unity and independence of the country and the dignity of the people. And all the soldiers said, well, if we, we're here to fight for our country. If we end up dying, we end up dying. But then they further elaborated and said, the ask really was for them to hold a suicide bomb to blow up the bridge to prevent Italians from having access to the middle of the country. And my grandfather was one of 4 people who raised his hand, and for 4 days he stood under the bridge, tied by a rope to one of the columns under the bridge with 3 of his other friends, and literally stay there for 4 nights waiting for the Italians to come. And the emperor came to check upon them, and they whistled from a distance. He was with a British general at the time, and then they whistled back to inform them that they were still there. And then for another 3 days they waited, and luckily I think the Italians probably had counterintelligence that this mission wasn't was being planned, and so they ended up not coming, and as a result, he was able to salvage his life. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that.
Exactly, that's what I think. That your talent didn't go that way, but it shows the patriotism that he was willing to give his life. You know what I mean? And again, this is history that I've read about, but to hear it from someone who family is really impactful. It's really it's very, very much a joy, because this history is serious history, because the whole freedom and independence of Africa was on the shoulder of Ethiopia at that time. If Italy had conquered, there would have been no free African land, and our story would have been that we were completely overrun by white supremacy. But because of the victory of Ethiopia, that story cannot be told that way. You know what I mean? We always had freedom in the holy mountains of Zion. And this confirms the special place that Ethiopia has, in terms of a spiritual land and a place of great prophecy. Now talk to let's get into the juicy part now. We're going to go into the Battle of Adwa. We're talking about the second Italian invasion, but obviously the Italians have always had eyes on Ethiopia. Why do you think, share why you think the Italians always had eyes on Ethiopia, and I'm going to share my estimation.
Right. Well, I mean, Italy came to Ethiopia, I would say, after the Berlin Conference, right, where most of the European countries had essentially partitioned different parts of Africa to take colonial rule over, and Ethiopia was, one of the few countries that maintained its independence. Geopolitically, it's in an important place. I believe that, given the presence of the French and the British in surrounding areas, Kenya, Sudan, Egypt, I think Ethiopia was sort of the one of the countries in East Africa that Italy thought it could get its hands over, and so they with the blessing of other European countries, particularly the British, they made a move during the time of Emperor Yohannes, actually, through the northern part of the country in Eritrea, and then later launched an attack to colonize the entirety of Ethiopia. So,
and let's also remember 1889, the Italian establishment of Eritrea. 1884-85 is the Berlin Conference of which you speak. And there is some incursions that took place even before Adwa with Rasalula.
Yes.
Who slaughtered some Italian soldiers that were making moves. So there was tension. Talk to us about the Treaty of Wuchale and set the stage. We're going to set the stage, people. This is going to be deep now.
Right. Yeah. So the Treaty of Wuchale was signed. So the Italians initially, right, as most European countries would do, they would either come through missionaries to convert the people. In the case of Ethiopia was a Christian country before most European countries. So trying to sell, Christianity to Ethiopians in a place where Christianity already existed didn't really work. The other approach was, coming through the guise of a corporation, and they would enter oftentimes into some type of land purchase agreement with local rulers to occupy land. The Treaty of Wuchale, interestingly, was a treaty that was signed by Emperor Menelik, but the Amharic and Italian versions were different. So the Italian version essentially rendered Ethiopia protectorate of Italy, and it mandated Ethiopia to use Italy in all diplomatic relations. So essentially, it recognized Ethiopia as a colonial state, in effect. The Amharic version said that Ethiopia had the option to utilize Italy for such diplomatic trade and negotiations and relations. And so it wasn't until the Ethiopians found out that there was this provision,
yes,
that rendered Ethiopia protectorate of Italy, where they essentially it was Empress Taitu who ripped the treaty in two, and that's really what kind of spurred the conflict and the war against Italy. So it's really the Treaty of Wuchale and the rejection or refusal of Ethiopians to accept such treaty is what preempted the war.
And that treaty was actually negotiated by Ras Makonnen.
Yes.
Signed by Ras Makonnen on behalf of Emperor Menelik. So this directly relates to High Majesties, who, this is one of the seminal moments leading up to the Battle of Adwa, the breach of this treaty, the subterfuge, there was an Italian representative that was in Ethiopia, very famous representative, and this caused a huge diplomatic fallout once this was discovered. Who were some of the main players? And remember that this was not too long after the Ethiopia recovering from the Kefu Khan, the evil days. So this was not Ethiopia at full strength. This was an Ethiopia that was still overcoming great tribulation. The Kefu Khan, they lost 1/3 of the population, 90% of the cattle gone. Emperor Menelik, they had a huge Italian loan that they had to repay during the Kefu Khan, so huge economic strain. Emperor Menelik himself used to get up and go into the fields with his ox and plow the fields to show the people that they had to work their way out of this great famine and tribulation. There was pestilence on top of that. Every affliction that you can imagine, every affliction you can imagine came at Ethiopia at the same time. So Ethiopia was in a very vulnerable position during these negotiations with Italy. And this was in the height of the scramble of Africa. So Ethiopia was trying to stave off the European powers by entering into friendly relationships. You had an Islamic state of Harar, which was not too long ago conquered by Menelik. So one of the questions for the Battle of Adwa was, would the Islamic people fight with the Christian against the Italians? In 1892, when His Majesty was born, Menelik had marched his army up to the border of Tigray. We talk about the Amhara-Tigray conflict of today. Well, in 1892, they were on the brink of war. Ras Mengesha, Ras Alula, the word had come that they were fomenting, trying to rebuild the forces of Emperor Johannes, who had been on the throne prior. And so there was question, would Tigray fight? Because Italy had sent representatives to try to break off Tigray to fight on the side of Italy. And there were questions as to would Ethiopia hold. Talk to us about who were some of the players during this time in terms of the Battle of Adwa. And because I think I want to get into the lessons, because right now we're going through tribal times, and there's a reason why Ethiopia is the only African nation that survived colonialism, and it was because of the unity of these different groups that at prior time were at each other's necks, who had shed each other's blood, but at the right moment they chose unity. Talk to us about some of the players and set the stage.
Sure, yeah. So you had Ras Makonnen, who you mentioned, who actually went to Italy and was in negotiations and discussions with Italians there as well, and and signed the treaty, not knowing that provision was there that rendered Ethiopia protectorate. And so Ras Makonnen, as a cousin of Emperor Menelik, he led the central command in the Battle of Adwa, also from the line of Solomon, as we mentioned earlier. You had Ras Mengesha Johannes from the Tigray region, who was the son of Emperor Johannes. You also had King Mikeb, formerly Ras Ali, who was a Muslim himself, the father of Lij Nebyat. Although he was not of the Solomonic line, he had a line of descent to Prophet Muhammad, but he married into the Solomonic line, I believe twice, ultimately marrying Shoaraga Menelik, Emperor Menelik's daughter, and that's how he became the father of Lij Nebyat. So there's definitely a spiritual dimension and religious connection, and lineage to the Solomonic line that helped really to solidify and bring all these leaders and kings, races together. You had Ngusta Kalayamanot from Gojam as well, from the Solomonic line, from the House of Gojam. And I think that kind of, and of course, impressed Ayatu herself, who
Yes.
comes from a long line of rulers in the north and the Semain areas as well. And so,
Connected to the Yujo Oromo
yes,
title
right,
from Wolo.
correct.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So you had all four houses from the line of Solomon represented, in addition to King Mikhail as well, um, who fought under the command, the central command of Emperor Menelik. And there was what they call an awaj, or a decree, where Emperor Menelik mandated for all of the provincial kings to send their soldiers and to meet at a place in Wollo called Warreinu, and it's there where they marched to Adwa and defeated the Italian enemy. So so there's a very, very strong presence of these Solomonic rulers, and it was instrumental for solidifying the unity of the country and maintaining its independence.
And one of the reasons, and you can speak to this, that the Muslim members of Ethiopia fought for the Solomonic dynasty is that in the Islamic tradition, the Prophet Muhammad sends his early followers to the king on the throne, the Christian king on the throne, who provides them with safe passage when they were under persecution from the peoples of Quraysh in Arabia. Talk to us about that connection with the Solomonic throne and Islam.
Yes, I mean, absolutely. I think you stated it. I mean, at a time where Muslims were being persecuted, it was the Prophet Muhammad who instructed his followers to go across the Red Sea to seek refuge under, kings that know justice. And so there was a just king, and so to avoid persecution, the early followers of the Prophet Muhammad sought refuge in Ethiopia, and it was an Ethiopian Solomonic king that helped to ensure their safety. And if that wasn't done, who knows? Maybe the Islamic faith wouldn't exist today. And in the Quran, in fact, it's stated that not one Muslim could wage jihad against Ethiopians because of this gesture and this favor that was given by the Solomonic dynasty to Muslims and their faith.
And this is important because, when we look at Africa has thousands of kingdoms. Let's be clear, thousands of royal bloodlines. However, the Almighty in history leads us on a path to where the future of Africa, the legacy of independence, rests on the shoulder of a Solomonic dynasty. And I bring this up because a lot of Pan-Africans in the West associate Christianity with being European. I've heard it said that Ethiopia was spiritually colonized by Christianity, that Christianity is a European. Even in Rastafari, we are having a conversation right now. Some people just don't want to hear anything about Judeo-Christian values, anything to do with that. However, the history of the Battle of Adwa shows that these tribes were brought together under the banner of the Lion of Judah. Speak to, how do you feel about what this kind of way of looking at the Battle of Adwa?
Yeah, I mean, it's look, you had prior to that time, right? You had the era of princes, right? The Zemen Mesafint is what it's called, where the different provincial kings kind of ruled over their own dominion, right? But it really was Emperor Menelik who helped solidify that unity. And at that time, during the era of princes, there really was an ethnic division per se, because the provinces were constructed not on the basis of any ethnic demarcation, but just based on how the I think they used natural boundaries like rivers and things of that nature to demarcate land. But it really helped to bring about a sense of unity. And a lot of times we take certain things for granted, like like our independence, like our freedom. And so when it's challenged, I think it also forced the Ethiopian people to kind of come together under one command for the greater good of the nation. While the Italians launched an attack against Ethiopia to dismantle Ethiopianism, to weaken the central command, the central government, to dismantle the Ethiopian monarchy and divide the people along ethnic lines, we were able to overcome that through Ethiopia's Solomonic kings.
And we just came out of watching. We watched together the Bob Marley One Love movie.
Right.
I would love to see a film about the era of princes. I can picture, the cinematic of Emperor Tewodros on the march, conquering kingdom by kingdom, because we really have to understand that Ethiopia, when he's talking about these kingdoms, they're separate kingdoms, meaning there's no central authority telling them what to do. They have their own ministers, their own royal court, their own, they're in some cases making relationships with foreign governments independently, as in the case with Showa, under King Haile Selassie. There is complete autonomy. So, when you have a young outlaw, because Emperor Tewodros starts as an outlaw, they call him a shifter or banda. He's on the periphery, winning acclaim, becoming a legend in the countryside with his exploits, because he's on the battlefield, but he's also a learned scholar, being educated in a monastery. I'm looking at a Hollywood film, Nebyat. You understand? The young dashing Tewodros, because it said when he marched into Showa, King Haile Malakat, which was Emperor Menedict's father, had already passed, and that Tewodros wept, and he had his body dug up to make sure it was him. And then when he found out that it was him, he had him reburied in a royal ceremony, so he was really showing the people of Showa that, the respect that he had, and that his mission was unity. And what he did, ladies and gentle people who don't know this history, is that he really captured all of the sons of these conquered kings, and he created his own school, for royals. He made sure all of these royal houses. How important was the University of Princes that was created at Magdala? This is like a Hogwarts for Solomonic kings, just for the people like the science fiction and the fantasy type of thing. But this is a school of Solomonic kings that was established at Magdala. Talk to us about Magdala for those who don't know, and how important was that period for the future unity of Ethiopia?
Sure, yeah. I mean, the Magdala, actually, the Battle of the Magdala, if you kind of rewind time, even before the Battle of Adwa, when Ethiopia was under the rule of Emperor Tewodros, it's the battle site where Emperor Tewodros and his troops went to war against the Brits. And Emperor Tewodros was looking to build a cannon, and he in fact imprisoned British diplomats who were in Ethiopia, and was going back and forth with Queen Victoria, and they were pleading for him to release these prisoners, and he refused, and so the British Army came to Ethiopia because India was also under colonial rule by the Brits. They had Indians and a whole bunch of elephants and caravans and all this coming, to fight against Emperor Tewodros' rule. And he ended up turning the gun on himself and killed himself to prevent Ethiopia from, because he didn't want to give his hands, in war to the British. And I think, to your earlier question, really understand the psyche of Solomonic kings and leaders, particularly Emperor Tewodros. He used to have, various delegates visiting him prior to them aboarding their ship. He would have them take off their shoes, and he would have his servants tip it over and make sure that there wasn't an ounce of Ethiopian um, dirt or dust for them to take it back. And so, I mean, this type of psyche, right? To not want Ethiopian soil to be taken to a foreign land because you had that much pride and dignity in your identity and in the land. It's really hard to fathom. For many of us, I would say, it's commonplace, right, to take certain tokens here and there from a certain country. But for him, he said, far more precious than thousands of jewels is a drop of Ethiopian soil, and he would forbid them from taking that to their land. And so, Emperor Menelik himself was actually, you can say, kidnapped or raised by by Emperor Theodros, and he was later released from Emperor Theodoros's rule, and that's how he himself was able to become a king of Showa, and or actually literally king of Emperor of Ethiopia, actually.
Yes. And let's be clear, and people, yes, we're live. Put your questions in the comments. We have Lij Nebyat of the Crown Council of Ethiopia, Selassie, stand up here in the house. We're going deep into Ethiopian history tonight. We're coming into the eve of the Battle of Adwa. We are celebrating here by keeping this history alive. If you have not subscribed to the platform, please go ahead and click that subscribe button, click the like button, send it out to the people. This is a great in-depth, you're hearing the stories. This is why I love reasoning with Nebyat, because you see these stories like Tedros making people knock the dirt off their shoes. These are the things that you get when you reason with your Ethiopian brothers and sisters, my family. These little nuggets and jewels that just make the history so sweet and so rich. And I'm writing, getting ready to write volume 2 of Haile Selassie's Ethiopia, which is going to cover the period of the Battle of Adwa. So I'm going to definitely be including some of this, character work, because I'd like to get into the minds of the different characters historically. And let's also be clear that the only reason that the British were able to conquer Tedros, who never lost a battle on the battlefield, let's be clear, is because they were working with a young Casamercha who would become Emperor Johannes IV, who by the time the British hit the shores of Eritrea, of northern Tigray, all of the region of Tigray was under the control of young Casamercha, who himself had been captive at that University of Princes at Magdala. So he knew Menelik, all of them knew each other because of the captivity. Him and his brother were released by Tedros to govern Tigray because Tedros was a visionary. He had plans, as you said earlier, to march his armies into Jerusalem and to conquer Jerusalem from the Islamic, control that was at that time the Ottoman Turks controlled Jerusalem, and he had plans to march the army. Tedros was a different kind of man. Talk to us about that relationship between Tedros and all of the other parts, because I think it's a sad, tragic story, because he became increasingly cruel as his reign. He became a victim of his own victories on the battlefield. Every time he would quell a rebellion, another one comes up, and he had to become increasingly cruel until he lost the love of the people. He became the villain. Talk to us about the history of Tedros.
Yeah, it's a tragic one. I mean, I think he probably exuded more rebel-like or fighter-like qualities than kingly ones, I would say. But he definitely was known for that. He was known for ensuring, paying retribution, to those who he thought he crossed them. He kind of was at odds with the orthodoxy as well. Many may view that as him being progressive. But I think in terms of Emperor Johannes helping lead the British to Magdala, to his demise, is one of it showcases the rivalry that existed between the different houses, but also betrayal, which which you can say is commonplace to a certain extent, but the notion of collaborating with enemies is really looked down upon in Ethiopia. It can be said that Emperor Yohannes, upon becoming emperor of Ethiopia, he did die fighting for Ethiopia's independence and unity as well. But despite Emperor Theodros, providing that type of support in his younger years, it didn't quite help him in terms of garnering the ultimate loyalty from those people from that perspective. I know when Emperor Theodros passed away, Emperor Menelik actually wept because he was raised by Emperor Theodros and had an affinity for Emperor Theodros as well. So
I read where it was whispered in some quarters that Theodros was grooming Menelik to succeed him, that he even loved Menelik above his own children that were there. We have some of the Lion Pride tapping in. Big up, Mena Demessie. Is this your family here?
She is, yes.
Beautiful, beautiful. She said, agreed. Thank you for the background history, important for understanding the national pride that unified her people across ethnicity. Beautiful, beautiful sound. Ethiopia 12. Yes, my brother. Let the world know Adwa means a lot, for sure. This is Lothario Cartwright. What does the guest think about the canonization of Haile Selassie as a saint in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church? Let me let you answer that question.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Obviously, Ethiopian Orthodox Christians, they don't believe in Emperor Haile Selassie as the reincarnation of God, and so the notion that he can be canonized within the Ethiopian Orthodox Church is a legitimate question. I think a strong argument could be made for that to happen. You have obviously the Rastafarian faith, which believes in Emperor Haile Selassie, and so for millions of people to believe in the emperor as a god, right? It shows not only that he's worshipped, but it also shows the reverence also that non-Rastafarians have for His Majesty. And so, the question of whether or not that is saintly is one for the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, I think, to take up on their own. But it's the idea has been floated around. I think it's a practical one. It's a question that the Ethiopian Orthodox Church would have to respond to.
Do you consider yourself as an Orthodox?
Yes, I do.
Okay, excellent. Fight Babylon, big up yourself. Lion Pride checking in. Haile Selassie, I rule and reign. Aya, give thanks for life. Family, North Carolina, tapping in. Big up yourself. Fight Babylon. Again, if you have any questions, put them in the comments. Miles Henderson, great information. Ethiopia has a major role to play in Pan-Africanism. What ways can Ethiopia continue to play a role in African and global Black unity?
Right.
I'm going to let you answer that question.
Miles is a great. Miles probably could answer this question better than me. He's a great brother who's doing great work.
Where is Miles based out of?
Miles right now, I think he's in the States now, but he actually moved to Ethiopia, lived in Ethiopia. He established. He's part of the Marcus Garvey Bronze Project.
Okay.
And, they're playing a leading role in trying to get a bust of Marcus Garvey within the African Union. He also is the founder of True Culture, and he has various chapters within various Ethiopian universities that are organized, to honor the legacy not only of Marcus Garvey, but also, they're coalesced around the concept of Pan-Africanism and African unity. And so I think, the Battle of Adwa, and maybe we'll get to this later, but it was a huge inspiration for liberation on the continent, right? When you look at the Battle of Adwa, which took place in 1896, it not only helped to solidify Ethiopian unity, but it also brought about a sense of African unity. Through the time of even Emperor Haile Selassie, when you look at what Emperor Haile Selassie was able to continue, it's quite impressive. And so, in 1897, right after the Battle of Adwa, the term Pan-Africanism was coined, in the West, where, the notion that Blacks have a common destiny, right, and that peoples of African descent could actually defeat Western imperialism, that was based upon the victory at the Battle of Adwa. And then you have what Emperor Haile Selassie was later able to accomplish with the establishment of the Organization of African Unity in the 60s, and then the land grant in Shashamane to actually have what Marcus Garvey and other people in terms of other great leaders were talking about repatriation and how do you go back to Africa. Well, the emperor made that happen by giving a land grant of 500 acres to Blacks in the Western Hemisphere. And so to this day in Shashamane, you still have mostly Rastafarians who set up shop in Ethiopia, and so when you look at the emperors from the Solomonic line in Ethiopia, they really played an instrumental role in implementing the ideals of Pan-Africanism, right? Making repatriation happen. You look at even Emperor Haile Selassie training Nelson Mandela, right, when he was exiled from South Africa, and Nelson Mandela using an Ethiopian passport and an Ethiopian alias name to re-enter South Africa to launch a struggle. And there are countless of things Emperor Haile Selassie did to really build upon the victory at of the Battle of Adwa in terms of that having tangible benefits to Black people throughout the world. And so that's sort of the historical aspect. I guess the more aptly point answer Miles' question. I mean, I think the Crown Council of Ethiopia, which exists in exile, could also continue that legacy, and it has been to a certain extent. Obviously, we don't have the monarchy in place within Ethiopia, but His Imperial Highness Prince Ermias Haile Selassie has been leading the Crown Council, pursuant to his appointment by Emperor Haile Selassie, his uncle, the first son of Emperor Haile Selassie Ntegein and Empress Menen, as president of the Crown Council, and he's traveled. I've accompanied him as well with other advisors to the Crown Council to places like Panama and Jamaica, where we're advocating for closer bilateral relations, not only between Ethiopia and Jamaica and places like Panama and others, but really coalescing around the concept and notion of Black unity and Pan-Africanism. So I think if we center movements around the history and legacy of the Solomonic crown, we can use that as a starting point to achieve, be it economic independence, solidarity, political, social, economic cooperation, etc. So I know that's kind of a long-winded answer, but
no, we're here. This is a reasoning show. We don't always get people of your knowledge, so I love it. We have questions are coming in. If you have questions, drop them in the chat. We want to make this interactive. We're going to get into how the brother got the Selassie stand-up statue. We're going to get into the establishment of the Crown Council, the Constitution. We're going to go deep tonight, family. So put your questions in the chat. We have Lij Nebyat here. We are talking about the Solomonic dynasty in Ethiopia, the relevance to the Pan-African struggle. People are licking down the Judeo-Christian roots of Rastafari. They're licking down the Judeo-Christian, anybody who gravitates to a biblical worldview. You know, a lot of the Pan-African community looks at that as being a colonizer's religion. You know, we hold a position as Rastafari from a longer time that the Hebrews were Africans, you know, which has been substantiated genetically from the language point, the Hebrew tongue being Afro-Asiatic language group, which Amharic and Ge'ez are off of that same Afro-Asiatic language group. So many things. So we want to make that connection and show people historically how important the Solomonic dynasty has been to the Pan-African struggle, to African unity. We'll get into some of the Pan-African achievements. This is a celebration of the Battle of Adwa. Talk to us about Empress Taitu and her role, significant role in the Battle of Adwa, because we talk about Emperor Menelik, and this is important. Somebody asked about Fano. We're going to get to the Fano question and what's happening in current Ethiopia. The brother is very knowledgeable with all of that. We're going to get to there. But I want to set the framework, because we got to bring this conversation into a unity conversation. The forces are trying to fracture Ethiopia to slow down the unification of the continent. There's no denying that. So we want to set a firm foundation on which to build. I believe the Solomonic dynasty has a key role to play in the unity of the entire continent. So talk to us about the role of Empress Taitu.
Yeah, I mean, Empress Taitu, she was more than just obviously a wife to Emperor Menelik. I mean, she was the one who in fact, many say, was very keen when it came to Western manipulation and domination, and was the agent from the Ethiopian side behind the Battle of Adwa. In fact, many say it was because of her guidance and leadership in her own right that we were able, that Emperor Menelik was successful in galvanizing the troops to fight off the Italians. And so Empress Taitu, also she's from the Solomonic line as well. She has a line through Empress Susunios. And so to your point, you can see these key figures in Ethiopian history having this common linkage back to the Solomonic dynasty. It's part of our history, part of our identity. And so Empress Taitu, I would say, was a very strong figure, and definitely she serves as a role model to not only to the females, but to all Africans and freedom fighters throughout the world.
Yes, and she was a master chess player. This was something that was documented in the history, war tactician. So as he said, she was very literate in terms of her reading of Ge'ez. She could read Ge'ez, Amharic. She was, a brilliant mind.
She played the
yes, she's a musician. She was a creative, you know what I mean? So I know a lot of ones can identify with that type of mind. And Menelik had great respect for her as well. She was very family oriented and really, tried to help her family. And she used her contacts in the north to the benefit of her husband and the benefit of the realm. Because we have to understand the geopolitics. The person who sits on the throne of David is still in a vulnerable position, because as he said, there are 4 other branches. Each branch of the Solomonic dynasty feels that they belong on the throne. Am I lying?
That's correct. Yeah.
So when people see, and I tell people, the fact that His Majesty gets all of the blame for Ethiopia, every problem, shows how successful he was in unifying the nation. You know what I mean? Because as we said with Tewodros, it was Casamercha who allowed the British to conquer, and the British had to swear to Tigray, to be fair, that they would not take any territory. So they were used as a scalpel to extract Tewodros by Emperor Johannes IV, who was a patriot. He was a very nationalist, Ethiopian nationalist in the modern sense. He forced the conversion of Islamic people to Christianity. That's why we have Muhammad Ali becoming Ras Mikael, later Negos Mikael, because of the forced conversions under Emperor Johannes, who gave a decree: either you convert to Christianity or you lose your title, to the nobility. So he was a nationalist, but he used the British. So it's a separate kingdom. He's not looking at, this is a foreign power. He's looking at, how do I get rid of this? And a lot of people looked at Theodosius as a usurper to the Solomonic lineage too. Yes. They looked at his claim as very tenuous, So all of these things in the Ethiopian mind are so important as to who sits on the throne. The level of intrigue is, beyond anything that you can imagine. Spies and back and forth, bloodshedding, exile, all of this happening within the confines of the empire. So we have to, now it's easy to look at it as one unified state because of the work that was done. But in the times of old, these were all separate kingdoms. So even by the time of the Battle of Adwa, as I said, there were a lot of questions. That's why Italy was so emboldened to send 30,000 troops. They thought Ethiopia would fracture into all of the various pieces. And one of the seminal moments, I say, and you can back me up on this, is when Ras Alula and Ras Mengesha come and they bend the knee to Emperor Menelik prior to the Battle of Adwa. They took a journey because, again, Italy, and some people say it's because Ras Alula hated Italians more than anything, more than he hated Shoah. But and Ras Alula was one of the greatest generals in Ethiopian history. He was the sword of Emperor Johannes the Fourth. You know what I mean? Who won the battles on the battlefield? The Turk Basha, they call him. So many things about Ras Alula we could talk about. Not loved in Eritrea and places, but that's the politics.
Right.
But the seminal moment. Talk to us about that moment, because Tigray could have chose to side with Italy. His father had gotten assistance from the British, but Ras Mangasha, who would later be married into the royal line, he chose with his general Ras Alula to bend the knee to Emperor Menelik. How important was that moment?
It was extremely important, because without the unity of all of the various houses of Solomon and provinces, the victory at the Battle of Adwa wouldn't have been possible. I think it's interesting, really, with Ras Alula too, because to your point, he was really, really fixated on getting the Italians out of Ethiopia, and Ethiopia was faced with two enemies at the time. Perhaps you can say that the British, because of Emperor Johannes's very close ties with the British, and this preceded the time of the Battle of Adwa. Emperor Johannes was fighting a war either against Italy, right? He had the option to support Ras Alula and evicting Italy from Ethiopia, or fighting the Mahdists in Sudan. And so Ras Alula actually was very confident in his ability to defeat Italy, which could have avoided Emperor Menelik having to fight them off in 1896. But Emperor Johannes, in fact, demoted Ras Alula after defeating the Ethiopians, I believe, at Dogali. And he, Emperor Johannes then went to the battlefield in Sudan, fighting against the Muslim Mahdists in Sudan. He was kind of fighting a proxy war for the British, and unfortunately ended up losing his life there. But then the son of Emperor Johannes, Ras Mangasha Johannes, and Ras Alula, bowing to Emperor Menelik and accepting his rule as the supreme king of kings in Ethiopia, really helped to solidify the unity, and it really helped to bridge the house of Tigray with the house of Shoah under the Solomonic line. and that's what really helped the defeat against the victory at the Battle of Adwa against Italy.
And I want you to keep that thought. We have Peter, who said, "What are the latest developments in regards to the Fano movement in Ethiopia?" And I purposely waited to ask that question because you just spoke about Amhara and Tigray, the unity, that making that decision. Talk to us about, just briefly, what's happening with Fano today, and how this lesson of Adwa needs to be applied.
So the Fano, they're essentially a homegrown, essentially defenders of Ethiopianism, right? And they've existed throughout time. The Fanos hail from the Amara ethnic group. I think you can make an argument to say that, throughout Ethiopia's history, there perhaps have been Fanos from other ethnic groups, but the Fanos today who have taken up arms are fighting really two fights. One is an existential fight. There's been a genocide levied against the Amara people, arguably over the past 50 years, but maybe more so over the past 30, and then even the past 5 with the election of the current Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed to power. There's been a genocide and a massacre of Amaras on the basis of their ethnic identity, and against Orthodox Christians as well. And so the Fanos have taken up arms to fight this existential threat for their own existence and ascertaining their humanity and God-given rights. And they're also fighting to free Ethiopia from the current state of ethnic apartheid, which is dubbed as ethnic federalism. And so it's really important to understand the struggle of the Fano within the context of Ethiopianism, because there are really 3 pillars of Ethiopianism. And Western powers that were trying to dismantle Ethiopia recognize these 3 pillars. The first is the Ethiopian monarchy, the Solomonic dynasty itself, which ruled Ethiopia for over 3,000 years, protecting its independence, the dignity of the people, the unity of the people, our language, our customs, cultures, traditions, religion. The second pillar is the Ethiopian Orthodox Church as well. It stands independent and separate from these other Western dominated religions. And so, the colonial approach really was to dismantle both the monarchy and the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. And there were attempts previously during the time of Emperor Susunios, for example, where there was attempts to convert the Ethiopian kings and people to Catholicism. So it's not a coincidence that Italy would come back years later to after the rule of Emperor Susunios to try to colonize Ethiopia. The third pillar are the Amara people themselves, and Amhara means comes from the Ge'ez word people, and then Hara comes from the root word Haranet, which means freedom. So Amara really means free people. So there have been parallels made to the Maroons, for example, who are unwavering when it comes to their conviction to fight for their freedom and for the independence of their country. And so the Amara should be seen in that light. We don't have the monarchy. We do have the Crown Council of Ethiopia, which does exist in exile and which does act in the capacity of the crown, despite the deposition of the monarchy within Ethiopia. So an argument can be made that we do have the crown still living in exile, but in terms of the monarchy existing and presiding over the Ethiopian people, in a political sense, that doesn't exist. And so that one pillar of Ethiopianism has been shot down, you can say. the second is the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, and attempts even by the current prime minister have been made to dismantle the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, to appoint ethnic-based leaders outside of the rule and order of the Holy Synod. Right, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church has its own organizational process and structure, and the current constitution is supposed to protect the separation of church and state. But there's heavy meddling and government intervention in the religious institutions, not only within the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, but within the Majlis, within the Muslim faith as well. And so, this is all being done to weaken the power structure and power base that exists. And the Amara people, essentially, and the Fano in particular, are those descendants of the fighters at the Battle of Adwa. They're really no different. If we had another Adwa today, which arguably you can say we're fighting against our own Ethiopian sort of Mussolinis, if you will. The Fano, they're a freedom fighting force, and they're they're looking to free Ethiopia from its current from the current clutch that the government has, and putting an end to ethnic federalism and restoring the peace, unity, and dignity of the Ethiopian people. And they have a keen sense of their history and culture as it pertains to the monarchy and Ethiopianism in general.
I want to be very clear, because I'm for the unity of Ethiopia, and it pains my heart to see the internal tribalism. For the record, His Majesty warned against dividing Ethiopia by tribal lines. That was one of the express warnings that was given at the granting of the Constitution in 1931, reiterated again. That the revised constitution, Ethiopia must remain united under one sovereign. And we also want to just be clear that when we talk about the historic Solomonic dynasty, we're not just talking about one ethnic group. His Majesty had Oromo blood, Menelik had Oromo blood, many of the emperors had Oromo. His Majesty also had Goragi bloodline as well. We can also say, if you look at Ras Makonnen through his father's line, that there were some Tigranian bloodline in there as well. So when we talk about the Solomonic dynasty, because my fear is that this further devolves into this kind of Amhara against Oromo because really and truly the Oromo should never fight against the Solomonic dynasty if they are Islamic or they're Christian, because spiritually the throne of David is supposed to take supremacy over politics. You know what I mean? So I'm very careful against kind of the framing of this, within these kind of rigid ethnic terms, because I think it plays into the people who are funding these conflicts, because don't feel like these are not being funded. You talk about proxy war. Don't feel like this is not part of a larger geopolitical strategy. I told you I was going to give you my thoughts on Italy. Let me give you a thought from a spiritual realms, because that's what we do here on the Lion Voice Network. The throne of Peter, which is the Vatican throne, they say they have been established on the throne of Peter, has always seen the throne of David as a threat, because in the Bible, the Almighty swore a covenant unto David. He never swore a covenant unto Peter. What the Vatican uses to justify their throne is that they say because Peter was the apostle, he went to Rome, crucified upside down, that his authority was given. However, when we look in the Bible, the interaction with Yeshua and Peter, the only person that Yeshua refers to as Satan, or says, "Get thee hence, Satan," was Peter. When because he was very emotional, rash. Peter had that personality, cut off a man's ears, in very hard-headed. I mean, him tell the people go damn pork and all of these things. He had a dream. Peter was, big up Peter, because he still was an apostle. But Peter was used as the foundation of the Roman throne. This throne has always seen the throne of David as something to be extinguished. This is why we see the recurrent, because remember, Mussolini is a puppet. Victor Emmanuel, they were puppets. We have to talk about Pope Pius XI and all of these. Vatican is an independent state, and it was during the reign of His Majesty that they became an independent state, when they saw the rising of the King of Kings and this child. Because remember, Italy's always had spies from say the name, sorry, Empress, pronounce it for me, because I see Titus' ancestor, who they can
Suetonius, the Emperor Suetonius.
Suetonius.
Yeah.
From that time, from the Portuguese, because when the Portuguese came in to give Ethiopia assistance against Grand the left-handed, Ahmad Grand, they never left, and they were trying to convert these emperors, and even before that, because the influence was there. But we have to understand, they've always wanted the Ark of the Covenant. They've always wanted to destroy the seat of King David. So there's always been this effort to undermine the throne in Ethiopia. They were never able to be successful. We look in the book of Revelation, it says that, even Zion for a time, would be under the sway of evil. And we see the whole globe get taken up, the Solomonic throne, which I would argue now lives in the hearts, all over the world, because this flag behind me flies on every continent. True, I and I as Rastafari, and it's become a spiritual flag, and no longer a political flag. Even though I know that Fano also used the Lion of Judah flag, but for Rastafari, you cannot go to a reggae show, you cannot go to a cultural event and you don't see the Lion of Judah flag there, and it's because of what it represents. So I just want to be very careful, because I have good brethren who are Oromo, I have good brethren who are from Tigray, and I know this is a sensitive topic, and they're going to say, you brought Fano on there and rah, rah. You know what I mean? Brothers and sisters, we are preaching unity. And I know that my brother feels the same way. What do you think is a solution? Talk to me about because I know you're a unity man.
Of course.
Although you support Fano, and of course we have to support in principle the aims of restoring the prestige of the Solomonic throne, because that's prophecy. And as I said, even if they're Protestant, because there's a huge Protestant contingent in Ethiopia now, they should still be looking at the word of prophecy, which talks about Revelation 5:5, Lion of the tribe of Judah, root of David. So they should not be in opposition to the Solomonic throne. Likewise, Islam, Prophet Muhammad told them not to wage jihad, so they're out of order on two fronts. And I think that is what needs to be emphasized, is to appeal to the spiritual covenants that bind the Abrahamic religions, and to keep it out of the political, because politics never going to have a solution. Politics is run by money and selling weapon systems to kill brothers and sisters. You know what I mean? So I just want to put that there. But talk to me about the unity. How do you see we solve this funnel against Tigray, against Oromo? How do we solve this problem?
Yeah, the Fano, they're not against any ethnic group. They're against their own oppressors and enemies of the Ethiopian state. You see, and so since the deposition of the monarch, if you look at it, it's really not. So if you look at how anti-Ethiopian political organizations evolved over time within Ethiopia, you'll see I have a problem with associating political groups with an ethnicity, although the political groups claim to be representative of the ethnic groups. The ethnic groups, various ethnic groups haven't necessarily acknowledged that their so-called political representatives represent them. Case in point, the Tigray People's Liberation Front, although they do have a base in Tigray, the Tigray people have not been polled. They haven't been surveyed to see if they actually support them or not. But if you look at how anti-Ethiopian political organizations and campaigns have evolved, they've happened outside of what can be classified or what has been classified as the Amhara ethnic group. And this is not a subjective statement, because if you listen to my previous comment, I said that the Amhara ethnic group is one of 3 pillars of Ethiopianism. That's not to discount the role of other non-Amhara Ethiopians who fought in the Battle of Adwa and who are loyal, patriotic Ethiopians. But, Western imperialists have identified the Amhara as a main target in terms of dismantling Ethiopianism. And so when you look at the Tigray People's Liberation Front, when you look at the Eritrean Liberation Front, right, even prior to the secession, you don't have one anti-Ethiopian organization that bears the name Amhara. There's not one. You have the Oromo Liberation Front. There was first the Eritrean Liberation Front, which in fact was supported by the Arabs, by Egypt. The whole concept of Greater Tigray actually comes from the British and later, subsequently, the Italians. And so if you look at the manifesto of the TPLF, their goal to this day is to secede Tigray from the rest of Ethiopia. This was a plan that the British had in order to control the trade routes along the Red Sea. Their thought process was that they would partition land from the Eritrean lowlands, predominantly Eritrean Muslims. They were going to give that territory to Sudan, because Sudan was at the time a colony of the Brits. And then they were going to have the Highlanders, who were Christian in Eritrea, combine that with Tigray and have that, and then have those 2 land masses secede from the rest of Ethiopia, making Ethiopia landlocked. The TPLF effectively did that to Ethiopia in 1993 with the secession of Eritrea from Ethiopia. So the TPLF are the ones who implemented what the Italians were unable to do at the Battle of Adwa, what they were unable to do under Mussolini's rule. And the people fighting against Italy at the Battle of Adwa, and then later, at the Battle of Maicho, was Emperor Menelik and Emperor Haile Selassie. So these are the Solomonic kings, king of kings from the House of Shaw, who were fighting to maintain the unity and independence of Ethiopia. Right. When you look at, even within the House of Solomon, when you look at Emperor Johannes, right, he was collaborating with the British to oust Emperor Theodros, who was responsible for solidifying the unity of Ethiopia. And Emperor Theodros came from the House of Gondar, of the Solomonic line.
Let's be fair, though. Menelik also had relations with Italy. We have to be fair.
Yes.
He aligned with Italy to war against Casamarca. There was that tension because Casamarca was close with the British,
right?
Which ultimately led to a very friendly relationship with Menelik and Italy until he was betrayed. Mm-hmm. So I just want to be a fair arbiter.
Sure, yeah. I mean, as someone who was raised by Emperor Theodros, of course, Emperor Menelik is gonna seek revenge, perhaps. But again, they're vying for power, and so
yes.
As I mentioned earlier, Emperor Johannes, fought in battles, protecting the independence, fighting for the independence and integrity of Ethiopia. It's questionable why Emperor Johannes thought that the Mahdists were more of a threat. These were Sudanese, right?
Yes.
Those who live along the Nile River. You would think we shared more in terms of a common ancestry than we would with the Italians. And so it's still a question, even for me to this day, why Emperor Johannes felt it was necessary to demote Ras Alula for fighting against the Italians and defeating them at the Battle of Dogali. And Ras Alula was chanting and saying that he would dump the Italians in the Red Sea, and he felt that he had the military prowess to do so. But his victory against the Italians resulted in his demotion by Emperor Johannes, and the Italians also settled, in Eritrea because of the agreement that Emperor Johannes had with Italy. And so it was Emperor Menelik who then was able to oust them out of Adwa. And it was Emperor Haile Selassie who accomplished what Emperor Menelik was unable to accomplish at the time because of the Rinderpest and because of the Kufuka, as you mentioned.
And a lot of people don't, because Emperor Menelik gets a lot of criticism for not continuing after Adwa to push them out into the sea, but he couldn't march that. This is an army of over 100,000 by some estimates. He couldn't feed that army going into Tigray that had been decimated at that time. Tigray had not recovered, and he didn't know what the fullness of the Italian armaments were at the time. So Emperor Menelik was a pragmatist. He said, "Let me consolidate my wins, and not push it and then risk, having my army decimated." And remember, people coming from as far as Harar. You have Ras McCunnin, who shows up with the Harari Oromo and the Harari Somali. The Shawans don't know how loyal this army is going to stay. Once the Italians are defeated, are they going to turn on the central? All of these things have to be considered, and you're outside of Shawa without a stable supply line in terms of being able to resupply your army. So a lot of people, the armchair quarterbacks of the latter day, have a lot of critique. But in the moment, I think that you can't blame Emperor Menelik for his decision not to press into Eritrea. The other thing that I would say is that I don't think we can undervalue the thought in the Solomonic king's threat. The biggest threat ever to the Solomonic throne never came from Europe. It came from Imad Gran and the jihad that came the closest to conquering Ethiopia. So the Islamic threat, which was supported by the Ottoman Turks, because remember, the first time a cannon was fired in Ethiopia was during the campaign of Imad Gran, who actually beheaded the emperor and paraded his head around, all over. And ironically, the same fate happened to Johannes, where his head was cut off and paraded in Sudan and all around. So very ironic. But I think that was one of the motivating factors was, the remembrance in Ethiopia of Emad Gran. There was a huge destruction of churches and scrolls. The Ethiopian history was almost extinguished during the first time mercenaries, the Janissaries, came into Ethiopia was during that time. So I think his preoccupation with Sudan was to prevent another Imad Gran from rising and conquering Ethiopia, because of course you have the independent city-states like Harar and other independent, Jimma. You had other Islamic. So the threat of this Islamic uprising, the Somali in Ogaden, you're surrounded by this Islamic sea. You know what I mean? So I hope that explains from my perspective, as someone who has studied the history, why Johannes went to against the Mahdis, as opposed to and remember the Mahdi who he was fighting was a legendary figure, just like Imad Gran at the time. So the spies and things would have happened. This was a charismatic Islamic leader who was rising up, armies who had given the British a huge time of trouble. Won some decisive victories. So it was a very perilous time, people. This is not, the decisions that the emperors had to make sometime were not popular, but they were motivated by real threats, real problems, at the time. So definitely, we have to respect Fano as a liberation movement. I did some videos and I say the same thing. I think the solution is at the negotiation table for these disputes. And I think the diaspora, the global Pan-African family, in the same way that Abiy called in the Pan-African card against the Tigray uprising, I think is the same thing that needs to be done to secure the rights of Fano to live without persecution, the Amhara, and to really bring in that global diaspora to make Ethiopia really see itself in unity, because we're going in the wrong direction. We see that there's a flare up with Somalia right now happening, and Somaliland, which all of these were conflicts that took place during His Majesty time as well. His Majesty tried to gain control over Somalia after the Second World War, when Italy was defeated. That was voted against in the UN. So there's a lot of history, family. Talk to us about, I'm going to go back. We're going to jump around a little bit. We have 15 more minutes. We've gone almost 2 hours, I'm telling you, this is... But talk to us about His Majesty granting a constitution to Ethiopia without being pressured by the people. So His Majesty rose the Ethiopian from a peasant to a citizen. We don't talk about this enough because under the feudal system, peasants had no rights. They were at the whim of the regional rasses and landlords. And His Majesty willingly gave up power from the class which he was a part of, the noble class, the same Solomonic line that ruled without question. And he rose the people of Ethiopia into citizenship, where they had a right. And then again, even went further in the revised constitution to give them the right to elect their representatives in the House of Representatives. And then there was another revision of the constitution that was coming in 70s before the Derg regime. Talk to us about the importance of the granting of the constitution and the genesis of the Crown Council itself.
Yes, no, I think you said it all. I mean, I believe the first constitution was 1930-31.
Yeah, 1931.
There was a second amendment, I believe, in 1955.
Yes.
And so that really was the first constitution. And as you mentioned, there were elected representatives, and then you had the House of Representatives, which was constituted of an upper and lower chamber. And so, you still had the formation of the Crown Council of Ethiopia in an official capacity, within the 1955 Constitution, and the Crown Council was very instrumental. It existed prior to that,
informally, yes.
Informally, right. And they played a very instrumental role in getting Emperor Haile Selassie elected to power, or positioned Emperor Haile Selassie over Lij Nebyat Demessie, the grandson of Emperor Menelik, based on the emperor's astute nature and just monitoring and analyzing the emperor from at a very young age. He was more fit for the role of a king, of an emperor, and so in the constitution, the Crown Council of Ethiopia was established, and it served as a legal advisory sort of board to the monarch, and was oftentimes consulted by Emperor Haile Selassie, for various guidance or recommendations in regard to domestic and foreign policy. And then there was in fact, I think I have the original draft actually of the other constitution that was, it was really a document that was circulated, which envisaged, transitioning Ethiopia to a constitutional monarchy under a democratic system as well. So Ethiopia was on a trajectory of perhaps modernizing the monarchy, but after this document was circulated, 2 weeks later, there was a military coup, and that resulted in the deposition of the monarchy, and in the massacre of 60 top officials by the Derg.
Yes.
We as Ethiopians, especially I would say since the time of Emperor Menelik and even prior to this ethnic federalist system, we didn't really see each other as Amara, Tigray, Oromo. We were all Ethiopians, particularly within I can say within the Amara culture, just because that's where I come from. We were never taught that we were Amara, we were Ethiopian, and I think those of us with a Solomonic mindset also, you're more, you're when you're building an empire, you don't think in very localized terms, right? Your mindset is more expansive, and so it could be a result of that as well. But when you look at what the Derg in effect did, they targeted 60 of the emperor's top officials, and many, if not all, probably would be classified as Amara under the modern definition of what an Amara is, or even historically based on their ethnicity. And so what we really see, or what we can draw from this, is that since the deposition of the monarchy, we've seen anti-Ethiopian rule, even by the Derg, by a socialist regime, by Mengistu Haile Mariam himself, who had slogans of Ethiopia first, who appeared very, very nationalistic. But in actuality, he targeted the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, and he also massacred probably millions of Amara people as well.
What was his ethnicity? Mengistu.
He was a mix of Amara and Oromo. But if you look at Meeso and his party, there was a high representation of Oromos within the Derg. And so when you look throughout Ethiopian time, whether it's from the time of Ahmed Grang, who came from the Adal region close to Somalia, or you look at the Oromo migration, of the 16th century, and how they pushed from the southern part of the country all the way up north, even into Gondar, very bloody, and reminiscent of what's happening now. And so, while we can't blame obviously all Oromos for this, it's unfortunate that you have political parties bearing the name of ethnicities, because they've just been giving a bad name to the ethnicity itself, even though the ethnicity stands alone and separate from it. And this is a problem of ethnic federalism, because every political problem will be contemplated as one grounded in ethnicity. And so
it's a genius move, and I've heard it said it was America that assisted with that ethnic constitution.
Yes.
Because it enshrines tribalism. You know
Right.
what I mean? It really enshrines tribalism. It's not helpful. Again, to be fair, the Oromo feel like the Amhara expansion during Menelik time was an imperial injustice. However, if we look at it from a Pan-African lens, we'll see again, it was necessary to consolidate, because those independent rulers would not have been able to resist European domination, and so they would have fallen to Europe. And then it's assumed they needed to Kenya, Sudan, and these European colonies. And so, those proud rulers had to be subjugated, and that's just the sad reality. We can't, pretty it up. We can't make excuses. However, when we look in hindsight, the fact that they remained within this black nation and their legacy, because we cannot talk about the independence struggle without talking about the Oromo, the Garagi, the Tigray. We cannot, we have to talk about all the peoples coming together to get that successful story. Absolutely. Where do the people of the Omo Valley figure in, the southern part of Ethiopia, into this great legacy, and what was that
right.
region like during the height of the Solomonic dynasty?
Oh yeah, it's in fact to this day you have people like in places like Walaita in in southern Ethiopia who praise Emperor Menelik. The problem really is with the false propaganda that was disseminated by anti-Ethiopianists, during and after the deposition of the monarchy. And so the struggle that we're seeing now is really specific to what has happened within Ethiopia over the past 50 or so years. And this is not to say that problems didn't exist prior to that, but when you look at Emperor Menelik and you reference, sort of the perspective of Oromos, what Emperor Menelik was doing was, again, it was consolidation, not only to protect and consolidate land under one, centralized Ethiopian government to protect Ethiopia's sovereignty, but he was also regaining the land of his ancestors. And so when you look at some of the Solomonic princes, the Meredazmachis, the princes, they bore titles such as, Asfaus and, Gafaus, and it was to expand your border. Literally, that's like the literal translation. And they were named that by Ethiopian monarchs in order for them to reclaim the land that they lost because of the Oromo expansions that happened prior to the time of Emperor Menelik. So it's important to kind of see it in that light as well. But there wasn't really an isolationist policy that existed under the Solomonic rule, because it's encompassing of all of Ethiopia's provinces, and never under the basis of ethnic orientation. So it's important to be cognizant of that.
And the Solomonic dynasty through marriage tried to bring that unity.
Absolutely. And I think Emperor Haile Selassie was a quintessential example of that, as others as well. I mean, Empress Taitu also was looking to intermarry the Shah and the aristocracy with people from the Gondar, the northern Samin area. The emperor intermarried with the house of Johannes, for example, and so you have grandchildren of the emperor who have double dynasties in terms of being related to Emperor Johannes and also Emperor Haile Selassie himself.
I want to big up my sister Wayne Mengesha. She's a product of that lineage, what I mean, and that unity,
Right.
But definitely what you're saying is a reality. We've reached almost the end of the program, but I want you to talk about Selassie Stand Up. Talk about some of the work that you're doing now, how people can tap in with you. People, if you have not subscribed to the platform, please subscribe to the Lion Voice. This was one of the my favorite episodes. We talking about Ethiopian history with a man that knows what he's talking about. So I'm in heaven right now. If you have any questions, put them down. But while we get any final questions, tell us about why it was so important for you to have a statue of His Majesty in front of the OAU or the African Union headquarters, and what you had to do to make that happen.
Sure, yeah. So Selassie Stand Up is an organization that I established to promote and advance the interests of the global Black community. And the primary objective at the time was to build a statue of His Imperial Majesty Emperor Haile Selassie, for his immense and incredible work to establish the Organization of African Unity. And he was a pioneer when it came to supporting African liberation movements. I touched upon some of His Majesty's contributions in terms of supporting African liberation with the training of Nelson Mandela, suing the South African government, filing suit with the International Criminal Court of Justice, negotiating in West Africa, the Biafra crisis, negotiating border disputes between like Morocco and Algeria, and contributing over 3,000
in Sudan as well,
the Addis Ababa Peace Treaty, and also contributing over 3,000 of his own imperial bodyguards to Congo. So when it comes to the establishment of the OAU, now called the African Union, I mean, the Ethiopian government allocated, budgetary line for the AU to be established, right? So, and it was financially supported by the Ethiopian government for a period of 2 years, and hosted the first conference.
Down to the stationery.
Yes.
To the stationery. Every cost was covered by the Ethiopian government. Africa Hall was built before the OAU charter was even signed.
Correct. And and prior to the establishment of the OAU, the emperor was trying to bring unity between the various factions that existed at the time. So you had the Monrovia group, you had the Casablanca group, and actually had like the Brazzaville group, which wasn't as prominent. And so the emperor was able to negotiate unity. He summoned both groups to Ethiopia, and we were able to ratify the charter governing the OAU because of the emperor's guidance and leadership. And unfortunately, he was snubbed of his rightful place. And while the statue was built for Kwame Nkrumah, there wasn't one built for Emperor Selassie. Obviously, that was due. I was told that was a result of the former Prime Minister Meles Zenawi and his ethnic hatred of Amaras, who snubbed the emperor of that rightful recognition. And so I launched I wrote an article substantiating all the reasons why His Majesty was deserving of a statue, and then launched a petition, and then lobbied both the Ethiopian government and AU leaders. So I wrote to every African president to endorse the project, and luckily it was came up within the Ethiopian president at the time responded favorably to it. The then President Girma Wolde Giorgis, who was a military officer during the time of the emperor, but it was really there was a motion within the AU, and a vote happened, and the AU unanimously decided to build a statue of his emperor. And in 2019, we were able to inaugurate the statue amongst members of the imperial family at the African Heads of State Summit. So it was a really, really long effort. I was trying to work initially with the Ethiopian Patriots Association in Ethiopia, but due to government oversight and political cadres of the TPLF and government operating, there wasn't much leeway, and so I was forced to launch the Selassie stand-up movement on my own, and grateful to God that it culminated in a successful outcome. And so there are other projects in motion that we have with Selassie stand-up. The website is under construction, but we'll maintain as a Pan-African organization, focusing around the history and legacy of the Solomonic crown.
Yes, and we'll bring you forward to talk about that. This is just the first visit, people. It is because the African continent, which comprises over 250 million people, were to remain divided among more than 30 states, the individual voices would not carry weight. I think that's from the speech to the OAU. His Majesty, based on what him said, Africa is too fractured to carry any weight, which we agree. There are 54 countries in Africa. The continent has been divided or splintered to carry weight. This is an issue that is almost insurmountable. I agree. The individual voices cannot carry weight. For that to change, all African countries would have to speak with one voice. I agree. Lula Day said, keep it, Neb. You got cheerleaders here. I think that's my teacher. Big up yourself. Lightning recently struck a statue of Pope Francis at a church in Argentina and destroyed the halo on the statue's head and the keys of Peter in the statue's hand. Jaja. Yes, the throne of Peter's gone down. It's revelation time. Consecutive aspora. This is an exceptional engagement. I appreciate so much the insight, both of you, and the fairness that you are engaging some often contentious issues while bringing your audience along. Give thanks, my sister. Talk facts, Neb. You got support. You got the support. Can you elaborate on the 1932 declaration defining the role of the Lion of Judah flag, in addition to the Ethiopian flag and its significance, origin, and meaning? Can you do that off the top of the dome?
Sure. Yes. Yeah. In fact, I've launched a movement to restore the Ethiopian flag, the green, yellow, and red flag, under the Major Lamau Lasadic Memorial Foundation. So I'm attributing that honor to my grandfather, who was a patriot, who relentlessly fought for Ethiopia's independence, who served. He actually single-handedly established the Patriots Association branch in Wollo, even though he was from Shoa, and in fact went to Russia to study how troops were taken care of, and then he later submitted recommendations to the then Mengistu Haile Mariam, who was in power, and he spent most of his time actually getting benefits for patriots recognized and honored by the Ethiopian government. So many patriots who fought against Italy in the 1935 to 41 war, who weren't recruited as soldiers, didn't qualify for any type of pension benefits, despite their service to their country. And so, since my grandfather fought in all types of wars and battles, from the central part of the country to the south to the north, he knew the battles and individuals, and was able to ensure that many patriots qualified for benefits and pensions. And so I'm giving the honor of the restoration in his name, but it's also a tribute to Ethiopia, to the many thousands of Ethiopian patriots, to the Ethiopian people, and Ethiopia itself. So the green, yellow, and red, green stands for the fertility of the land. Yellow is really peace, and then the red is the blood and the valor, the bravery of the Ethiopian people is what it's symbolically represents. From what I know, the Lion of Judah flag, the Lion of Judah signifies, Jesus Christ, or God in himself, right? But it's a symbol that the Solomonic monarchs utilized, but it was never made as part of an official national flag. The Ethiopian national flag was changed by constitution by the TPLF in 1994, when they put some star in the middle over some blue color. I really don't know what it's representative of, but perhaps it represents the various ethnicities that the TPLF thinks that Ethiopia is made up of. So the current Ethiopian constitution contemplates Ethiopians and ethnic states or as separate nations, right, in and of itself, and they contemplate the formation of Ethiopia as and the constitution itself has a covenant signed by people that come from different nations and nationalities. So the preamble reads, the people, nations, and nationalities of Ethiopia. There's really no concept of citizenship rights, because in their mind, and this has been continued to this day, Amaras are a separate people and nation. Tigrayas are a separate. The Tigrayans are a separate nation and people. The Oromos are a separate nation and people. And so, you can see how we've regressed. From victory at the Battle of Adwa, which not only sealed Ethiopia's independence, but spurred a whole liberation throughout the continent under the rubric of Pan-Africanism and African unity. And you see the Ethiopian flag adopted by like 17, 18 different African nations upon independence. You see the green, yellow, and red reflected, and you see one right behind you with the Lion of Judah, right? You see green, yellow, red here as well, and the Lion of Judah.
I need that tracksuit, by the way. You have to
I got you.
That thing is sharp. Right. I've been watching it all night. I said, I need one of that. Yeah.
Right. So that's the history. The Derrick also didn't really change the flag. They had their own emblem. What is it? Is it the axe and chisel? Or I'm probably not doing justice to the socialist era, but that also was specific to the political party, but the national flag, and Ethiopia's emblem, as what was submitted to the UN reflected the green, the tricolors, the plain, clean green, yellow, and the red flag, and that's what we're trying to restore, and we'll be successful, just like we were with the Selassie Stand-Up project. So it's a matter of time. And Fano bears the right flag. Fano is fighting for to free not only themselves but Ethiopia as well, and they're carrying the green, yellow, and red flag, which itself is symbolizes a true Ethiopian identity. In terms of Ethiopia as a nation state, in terms of the unity of the people, and so that I think that's probably enough to say about the current flag.
Yeah. I'm very, as Rastafari, we were very concerned with the change of the flag, particularly with the illuminating light coming off of the blue. One say about Illuminati, these kind of things, and the symbolism of that replacing the Lion of Judah. But yeah, I think definitely that's something that could get a lot of support from the diaspora, because that flag, the tricolor flag, has a lot of significant historical context, as you say. And I know there's a lot of movements to try to move the capital of the OAU or the AU from Addis Ababa. And that happened during Meles' time, where Gaddafi was trying to move it to Libya. And Meles had to trot out all of the footage of His Majesty,
right,
welcoming the African leaders. They always have to come forward to the king,
right?
Because of the work. I always say the work speak for itself. The work will stand. So definitely give thanks for your work, your hard work that you're doing to really keep the Ethiopian and the Solomonic history alive. What are what is the future in terms of the priorities for the Crown Council? You are PR for Crown Council. What messages could you share from the Crown Council in terms of moving forward? What the
sure. Yes, and thank you for asking that question. And I should state as a disclaimer that I conducted this conversation, not representing the Crown.
Yes.
In an official capacity. But His Imperial Highness Prince Ermias Selassie issued a statement regarding the current and future state of Ethiopian politics. The Crown Council has always and will always stand for the unity of Ethiopia, for peace of all of Ethiopians' families. And, the prince is very much engaged in monitoring the situation on the ground and devising strategies to come up with viable ways to bring about long-term peace, stability, and unity to Ethiopia. We do believe that the last draft of the Constitution that was written during the time of Emperor Haile Selassie, should be used. I mean, we believe that we do need constitutional reform. We cannot exist as one nation state under a constitution that that essentially, in effect, will keep Ethiopia in a perpetual state of ethnic conflict.
Yes.
We need
by design,
right. And so constitutional reform is very important. There are various efforts underway and various proposals that actually include the Crown Council and the Solomonic Dynasty as a solution and part of a government structure that would do away with ethnic politics, but allow for equal protection of ethnicities under the law, but we would relegate that, perhaps in a non-political arena, and our hope is that Ethiopia will find its path towards long-term peace, stability, and unity.
And I've shared with you off the record that I really think the Crown Council needs to engage in education about the Solomonic Dynasty, and really, because as you said, during the Derg, it was illegal for information or even a picture of the emperor to be seen. That the history has been so distorted, so the youths that are fighting these wars now know nothing about the history and how that history of Adwa and how the tribes came together and the kingdoms came together, for African unity. That story is not being told in that way to these fragmented ethnic groups. The Oromos are learning Oromo history, Tigray is learning a Tigray history. Everybody's learning this separate, and it's not being formatted in a way as to lead to unity. And I think that's where the Crown Council can definitely, serve a strategic role. I also shared with DI that in terms of the Rastafari community in Jamaica, we had some concerns with the statement from the Prince. That's an internal matter we can talk about off the record. But we hope that we can facilitate better connection with the Crown Council from a community perspective with the Rastafari community in Jamaica and just generally. And I think that, the Crown Council, to us, it is a symbol because, for us as Rastafari, most of us, we don't see His Majesty as being dead. We see him as being missing, disappeared. He took away himself from the temporal world to allow his children, which was Ethiopia and Africa, to stand on their 2 feet. He took a militant stance for peace. At the end of his reign, he could have crushed the Derg like a bug. He chose not to, and for that he was called senile, and his faculties were called into question because he refused to crush the student revolts, the union revolts, and the Derg revolts, all that were happening at the same time. He refused to use force, Ethiopian against Ethiopian, instead humbling himself to these children that he had raised from they were in kindergarten, who were coming and making demands upon him. He would sit with them, listen to their demands, and this would happen for months. He was in, negotiation with the Derg, listening to their problems, and he said that of the student movement, if they had taken the time to listen, they would have seen that our reforms were already doing most of the things that they were asking for. And I tell people, His Majesty was a victim of his own success, because the success of his reforms meant that more people were pouring into the country, from the countryside into the city center. So there was rising unemployment, but it was because the country was developing and there was, growth. So that's naturally going to happen. And it takes time to absorb all of these. And that discontent was really preyed upon by both the Soviet Union and the West, for this proxy war that we see happening even up until today. So that being said, family, I just want to give thanks for our special guest who came after work. This is a businessman, successful in healthcare, doing great things in his day-to-day work, and not a little under the weather. He sat with us over 2 hours now, going through the Solomonic history. Do you love it? Drop a comment, let us know, so we can bring the brethren back. Let him know that we love him, and all of these things that we want to see. Give them your contact, how they can support Selassie Stand Up, your initiative for the flag. Let them know how they can contact, how they can support the effort.
Sure. Well, I could be reached via email. I would say off the top, ndemessie@gmail.com. I also have on Facebook Selassie Stand Up page. So definitely like that. You can share it. You can send me a private message. Also, the Major Lemma, LEMMA. Woldesadik is WOLDETSADIK. So the Major Lemma Woldesadik Memorial Foundation. I also have a Facebook page. You can request to be a member and send me a private message as well. And then on change.org, I have the restoration, the Major Lemma Woldesadik flag restoration project as well. So you can definitely sign that, and I can make that information available to the Judge Kwasi as well. So you guys can sign the petition and stay in touch.
Give thanks. And Again, you see why it's so important. If you're not subscribed to the channel, please subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell. I just found out from some of our Lion Pride that they're not getting notices when we're posting. They're not seeing it on their screen. So some shadow banning may be happening because we're talking about the emperor. And this is the person they want to keep buried in history, because with the violations of international law that are happening today, with everything that is happening, the prophecy of the emperor at the UN, when he said, until the philosophy that holds one race superior and another inferior, is happening right now, and they want to hide that. So even if you're part of the Lion Pride, make sure you're subscribed, make sure you click the notification bell, make sure you comment on the videos, make sure we're fighting an algorithm, people. So make sure you tap in so that you can see the videos. Again, March, we're tapping in with the Rastafari women. The whole month, Women History Month, we're going to have interview after interview of Rastafari women who are doing powerful works across the globe. So stay tuned for that. And remember that the time has come for the Lions to tell our own story. And this is the Lion's Voice.
This is Junior Morgan of Bob Marley and the Wailers. The time has come for the Lion to tell his story. And we have here the Lion Voice. So listen in and get nourishment for the stomach and for the head cup. Jah Rastafari.
Give thanks.
Give thanks and praise.
Yo, this is Plague Events and time have come. The Lion tell them one story. This is the Lion's Voice. Stay tuned.
Well, Lion Voice, tell them that's the people first choice. Lion Voice, make the lioness them feel nice. Lion Voice, with the lion cubs we sacrifice. Lion Voice, got to show the people them the life. Lion Voice. Well, Haile Selassie the First, the Almighty, and he was crowned with Empress Menen. And you see there come a time in every relationship in it brand new and your heart is full of doubt. And you try investigate to check things out. And sometimes you see if you follow word of mouth, you end up take the wrong route. Well, it's a mystery, what a mystery, and I can't see. But will she miss me? Will she trick me? Or is it just me? But it's a mystery, what a mystery, and I can't see. But will she miss me? Or will she be the wife and mother of my baby? Sometimes I feel like she's holding back. Something inside says it don't react. Sometimes I hear how the people chat. Most of the time we ignore all of that. The way she read books made my soul relax. Love how she look and she proud to be black. Me love how she cook and how she state the fact. She said the wicked are female like wax. Well, it's a mystery, what a mystery, and I can't see. Well, will she miss me? Will she trick me? Or is it just me? Well, it's a mystery. Well, front to us a son was born and a child was given.
I want to ask you a question. Have you got your book? Haile Selassie's Ethiopia Volume 1, The Rise of the Priest Warrior King. I've read the book in its entirety, and I must say it's very inspirational, very informative, and very historical, right?
Them call him Lij when he was born, rain fall from the sky. Them call him Lij when he was grown in airplanes he fly. They call him Lij, lion break the chain, beat not, don't cry. Them call him Lij, read the Revelation chapter 5 verse 5. Then born near the city of Harar, the inspiration for Bob Marley's guitar. People crowd him like some big superstar. It no matter if I